Hello, everybody. I'm so excited today because while I've been having a lot of great videos to share with you with just me as the person talking, today I'm thrilled to have a conversation partner that I'd love to introduce you to and have you get to know, my dear friend Yvette Alcott. Everyone, welcome Yvette. I'd love to tell you a little bit about Yvette, and then I'd love for us to have our conversation for you to listen to and celebrate all the wonderful, amazing work that Yvette's doing in this world. But get to know Yvette a little bit. I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. Yvette Alcott is an actor, academic, and business person. She has performed for over 25 years, acting in theater, film, and TV, and also used her performance skills to work as a business actor, enhancing workplace training programs. As an academic, Yvette spent 5 years as lecturer and unit coordinator in social psychology at the University of New England, Australia. She now runs two businesses. First, as a founding partner of Corporate Actors Australia, which provides professional actors to the business world. She has also taken her accumulated skills from theater and academia and combined them to become founder and CEO of Psychologies for Change, a niche consultancy which offers learning and development programs to business and industry, drawing on social psychological theories and delivered using play, improv, and performance-based techniques. She is an advocate of the benefits of play and improv in learning and development and is co-founder of the Global Play Brigade. Yvette lives in Sydney, Australia, and we are thrilled to have Yvette with us today. Yvette, there's so much beautiful offers in your bio, so let's start wondering together about maybe some of those initial experiences you've had. I'm curious about your history as an actor, comedian, film and TV person. How did that get all started? Tell us a little bit about that.
Gee, look, it's great to be here, Luke. I just want to say that's for sure. And it's great to be chatting with you. I really enjoy our chats we've had in the past. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again today. And it's so much fun listening to someone read your bio. I think, oh, really? Have I done all that? Okay, that's me. Okay.
That is you.
It's so interesting to hear it from the outside. But look, with acting, we can go right back. We can go right back, if you like, to... I think it's based in communication for me. I think that's where it started. I'm the youngest child of three. And by the time I was born, my older brother and sister, I mean, the party had already started, that like everything was all happening and the party had already started and I came along and, you're just this little baby looking at this blooming, buzzing chaos that's going around you and just having to go with it, you just go with it. And then, so by the time I arrived, my siblings were at school. By the time, I sort of got to school, they were moving into high school and on it went. By the time I get to high school, my parents go get divorced, right? My parents go and get divorced. And then I'm kind of thrown back into this silent observer, having no idea, like not being explained the issues or why it happened, not really understanding anyway. And so observing all these family dynamics going on and not knowing how to express those emotions or feelings or not knowing how to be heard. So I don't want to go into that too much because it's, it just get like a go on for hours, but just the notion of being able to articulate what you feel and communicate and also watching, for a while there, being a member of my family was kind of like, it was fraught because people were treading on eggshells. There was lots of hurt and betrayal and all this drama was going on inside the family. Yeah. And watching people navigate that, and as the young observer watching all this going on, I think I just thought I want to know how to navigate that. Not consciously, but there was something that was driving me towards that. So I don't think it's any surprise that I became an actor and a psychologist. I think those two, I've always described acting and psychology as the two ends of the same pole, and that pole is the human condition. So you've got being an actor on this end allows you to delve into people's motivations and why they do the things they do on a very subjective level. And then psychology on the other end does the same thing, but on a more objective level, on a more kind of meta level, I suppose. So I've always thought that they're a really good marriage and they're the two ends of the same pole. And anyway, so moving into acting first before psychology, I just found it allowed me to play with who I was and allowed me to push boundaries on who I saw myself as, identity. It allows you, I think being an actor, particularly when you rehearse as an actor, it allows you to play with identity, with your identity. And so, you know, I found myself in rehearsals, particularly for theatre shows, or acting school was an amazing process. I think it should be mandatory for everyone in the world. I think they all should have to go and do acting school because it allows you to kind of deconstruct who you are and put it back together in all sorts of different ways. And it just makes you, I think, when you're rehearsing for a character, you know, you're still you. The character doesn't exist. And this is something my acting teacher said to me, the character doesn't exist. You are the character. So it's basically you behaving in different ways, behaving in completely different ways. And so it allows you to play with your identity and who you are. And I found it expanded who I was to become a more comprehensive version of myself, really. It allowed me to grow and develop being an actor so much. And it allowed me to understand people's motivations and allowed me to understand how to communicate around those motivations and on top of those motivations. And I think what acting did for me was it made me understand that play is something that is truly developmental, and that's what it's good for. And so it changed my life, really. Becoming an actor changed my life and changed who I was and allowed me to become a much bigger person, more comprehensive version of myself. And then, of course, I went into psychology because I found it so exciting, which takes me into when I started working in the business world as an actor. Because you've got to eat, you know, you can't always eat as an actor. You know, you often got to find other ways of earning a living. And I wasn't a very good waitress and I wasn't a very good receptionist and I wasn't very good at all those sort of part-time jobs. But so finding work in the business sector was kind of the next step that I used, took those acting skills with me and became a business actor. So I think acting and particularly the rehearsal phase of acting for theatre shows is an incredible form of developmental play. And I use it to this day. I use it to this day in my work and everything I do. And I miss it, actually. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who I went to drama school with, and she was saying to me, I really miss those. I really miss rehearsing back at drama school, just rehearsing for plays, because you do play after play after play. And I said, yeah, that was the most fun time, because the things you get to do when you're rehearsing, because the pressure's off, you're playing with developing this character, you're playing with developing this person, and the pressure's off. I mean, obviously when performance time comes, the pressure is on to make sure you're doing it the way it should be done. But in that development of that character, it's the most beautiful, beautiful form of play. And that got me hooked as an actor.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, that's so rich. I think I'm curious about so much about what you gave, and I think for maybe to pick one thing for now, but there's more we could wonder about together. There's something very positive and hopeful about this playfulness that you're giving about the rehearsal process and the pressure being off. I'm wondering if you could say a little more about that as a possible developmental activity, as a therapeutic activity, as a possibility for human development. Can you wonder a little bit about the pressure being off in play and discovering slash creating identities? That's so fascinating to me. Is there anything else you'd like to wonder with me
Fascinating
about
to me.
that?
Yeah, I suppose there's so many things to wonder about with that, but because the pressure is off, and all these things are popping into my head, Luke, as we're talking now about if you talk about play in higher education or play in the
Yeah.
workplace, and that I think that's why it gets so atrophied when it gets into those environments, because the pressure's on. You've got to perform, you've got to
Mm,
perform, pressure's on. So people pull back from play because play is just when the pressure's off and you just want to have a bit of fun.
yeah.
However, it, the rehearsal process obviously is a dedicated period of time to get something, to create something, to create a play.
Yeah.
So there's certain pressure because there is a time limit to this rehearsal period, but within that time period, you're allowed to experiment. You experiment with what you're doing, and it feels good or it doesn't. It feels right or it doesn't. But you're allowed to give things a go, a
Yeah.
try,
Wow.
and then it feels and then you can build on that. And invariably, I mean, obviously there's one woman and one man shows, but invariably you're working with a cast, you're working with other actors, so you're co-creating these worlds together. And you've got the director, who I always feel like directors play the role of mum or dad. They play the parental role in a play. They kind
Uh-huh.
of keep everybody on track because they have that overarching vision. But as an actor, when it's just you creating this role and working with your fellow actors, because you have to, because you're having conversations with them as the character, and so you're experimenting together and creating this world that didn't exist, but you're all creating it together. And it's the most,
Mm.
and it is a fascinating process. It's a fascinating process. And I would just like to spend my time rehearsing plays and maybe not ever performing them, because the rehearsal time is the playtime and the developmental time. And then taking those skills into, taking those skills or that rehearsal environment into, I don't know, into a workplace, to allow people the same freedom to develop and grow, or for communities as well, to allow communities to develop and grow and change and create the world that they want to create as you're working together. It's incredible. It's an incredible thing to be able to use. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so powerful. I think for me, just to build with the gifts you're giving, um, often for me at least, I've often seen this like unnecessary dichotomy or distinction between being an actor and being an improviser, and I've done both in my life. Meaning,
Okay.
I've I've rehearsed for plays, I've been cast in particular roles, and that felt more like I was following what was already on the page or in the director's vision for the show, for example. And in contrast, there was this openness, this kind of liberty you're giving in the improv world for me more, where it was like, oh, the opening line is just the opening line of the dialogue or of the scene or the title of the play or whatever, and everything's up to us. And you're giving me this playfulness of creating characters that I don't think I experienced much in my acting days. So I want to thank you
Okay.
for that. It felt more like I was like, no, this is what's on the page. This is what the character already says. This is what the director wants me to deliver and how I'm supposed to deliver the line. And you're giving me this and us this gorgeous offer of playing with creating those characters.
Mm.
And so I just wanted to give you that gratitude, because I think that's at least often why I sometimes even bristled at doing theater, because I was like, well, somebody else already has a plan for this character and they've just cast me to effect that plan. You're giving us some new possibilities there, And at the same time, if you don't mind my wondering with you, there felt like a dichotomy for you because you were saying once the show runs, that playfulness, that character just sort of plays out night after night, show after show. Is that what you noticed in doing your acting work? That there was this
What I
joy in rehearsing, and then once the
mm,
show opened, it was like, all right, I'm going to just do this character 3 to 7 nights a week.
probably, yeah, that sounds very bleak, Luke. Oh,
Yeah, no,
okay.
no, no.
I'm in a run of Mousetrap on the West End, and I'm going to be doing this character for the next 27 years. But
Yeah, yeah. But if it's not,
well, I
how did that
wonder.
feel? Yeah, how did that feel for you? Because I think that's a very powerful perspective on character development within the theater and the developmental possibilities of it. So how did that work for you even after the rehearsal process was over?
I think so. So the pressure was on because you have to find your mark, you have to find your light, you have to make sure you know your lines because you can't let your fellow actor down. So you've got to know your cues and know your lines, and so you need all that, and which is another thing of rehearsal because you drill that and you drill that. So that's another thing. So if you've got all that prep done and you're all done and you're solid with that, I think what you can do is then still play. You can still play. And certainly in shows that I've done, particularly if you've got a playful cast members as well, and they're relaxed and they feel solid on all the things that they have to do, like all those, actually knowing your lines and knowing where you need to be on stage and not tripping over the furniture. Then you can play with each other in the moment. And also but I'm talking about theatre really. I'm not talking about film or TV for this, but I'm certainly with theatre, you feed off what the audience gives you as well. So they might be,
Beautiful.
they might laugh in moments that you just thought, oh my gosh, the audience have laughed. So that gets everything new again, makes everything new because they didn't laugh at that line last night. And so, or someone might do just something slightly different. So every night will be different. And because you're in the moment, yes, you've got all that stuff that you've learned and you've got your lines that need to be delivered, but you're in the moment and anything can happen, which is why it's good to have really good improv skills when you're an actor in theatre because anything can happen. And you need to be able to improv your way in and around that for the play to keep the performance happening. So I mean, it's still enjoyable is what I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's still a fabulous thing to do to be doing a play because you've got that energy from the audience and the energy from the other performers. And there's nothing like it. For me personally, there's nothing like that. It's such a buzz is like it's a physical buzz and a mental buzz. And that's why I don't think when you're doing theatre, you can't just then go home and go to bed. You need to be up and buzzing for a few hours before you can wind down and get to bed. So it's it's a very nighttime life.
Yeah.
Yeah, but always something different and always something that you need to be in the moment. And that's something with play, I think, as well. You're in the moment. So even though that is a play that's constructed already, you're still in the moment and things will be different from night to night because we're human beings and that's what we do.
Beautiful. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think what you're giving, I mean, there's again so many gifts here. I think it's also for me, Yvette, being playfully provocative about this notion of identity. Like you
Mm,
mentioned it earlier, and for now, I don't mean to make them completely synonymous, but maybe a character has an identity. Either the playwright has written the character as a particular way, or you have a sense of, I'm creating a character and this is what I believe this character to be like.
mm,
You're offering this powerful reminder of how often we get maybe trapped in the fixings of what a character should be, or even our own life identity should be. And there's
mm,
something very provocative and hopeful about being open to continuously being in that present moment to create who we are and to create who we're becoming and not just follow the script or do it like we did last night or last meeting or last class, whatever the context might be. I'm wondering if that
yes.
at all resonates for you in any of the work/play you do and continue to do.
Always. Absolutely. And you just put that so beautifully then, Luke. I think I'm going to get this quote wrong, and Kathy might kill me, but Kathy Saylor said a quote which I love, and actually have it on my website anyway because I think it's so strong with as far as identity goes. So she said something like, we live out our days under the burden of our identities.
Yeah.
It's kind of a burden that we have to, oh no, I wouldn't do that because I'm like this. Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm this, so I wouldn't do that. Oh, I know, I would always do it that way because I'm like this, because I'm a doctor, or I'm, or I'm a teacher, or I'm something else. So if you've got a profession, that might be part of your identity, or if you're a mother, that's part of your identity. And all these, there's so many parts to our identity, but they all influence our attitude to things and our behavior, because they either inhibit us or they make us go a certain way because that's what someone like me does. I do this. And we can get trapped in that. We just get trapped in that. And being able to break even just little bits of that and get out from a crack and just do something different, to try that on for size, which is something that I take into my work as well, with people who are approaching problems in a certain way. I said, just try this on, with, just kind of improv direction, essentially. Just try this on. Try it on like it's a coat you've just pulled out from a very nice rack of new clothes, something that you wouldn't normally go for that coat, but just try it on and just see how it fits. Just try that on. And if it feels too tight or it feels a bit uncomfortable, give it a moment. Or if you just don't like it, take it off and try something else on. But just be willing to leave the old tweed coat that you normally wear. Not that there's anything wrong with tweed coats, but if it's the one that you're always wearing, just leave it over there for a while and try, that bright red woolen one on instead or something. So it's a matter of pushing who we usually are just to see what else we can be. And that's okay. And I think play, and certainly, being an actor for me, really helped with that. It really helped me realize that I can be all sorts of things. And isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing that I can actually, and sometimes, you can take that with you. You can take the little boundaries that you've pushed in your own character, in your own persona, in your own identity, and push those boundaries just a little and walk down the street with that new boundary. And it's different, and things might look different, and things will feel different, and people might treat you differently, and all that stuff opens up so much in the expansion of who we are. And I put all that down to play. I just think it's so important. It's so important in so many things, and acting had taught me that.
So much. And I think so much of what you're giving to the world is that this power of play, this power of creating identity, of supporting development, is not limited to just folks that might go to theater school or do an improv show. Because you mentioned, and I'd love to hear more and create more with you in this conversation, it seems like from your bio that you're offering these kinds of possibilities of new performances, new playfulness in other contexts, not just in the theater, like in higher education and or in business. Those feel often to me, since I've been in both those worlds as well, overly scripted, overly predictive. So I guess I'm wondering about the revolutions you're doing and co-creating in those contexts of bringing play to worlds like higher education and business. And another quick comment about that, another provocative factor for me there is that that's also for adults, because that's also a tough group, often in my experience, to invite such, try on this different coat, just play with what's possible. So I'm curious how those experiences have been for you, offering play to folks within in higher ed and or business.
Now, with the higher ed, I think you would know more about that than me, but with my experience working in that world as an academic, I I think it's what ultimately drove me out of that world, was that
Mm.
it's not playful enough. And I think, I mean, academia is, it's a place of knowing. You know, it's, if you're a professor or you're a lecturer or you're an academic, you're the expert. You're supposed to be the expert. And so it's a place of knowing. So I think the pressure to know everything is really big in universities. And well, that was my experience of it. Maybe because if I stayed longer, I might have settled into that, and it might have been different by now. But the 5 years or so that I spent as an academic, I felt the pressure to know was huge, and so it's like there's no room for play. So it's like academia
Mm.
is all about knowing, whereas play is all about not knowing. Really,
Oh,
it
wow.
plays about, I don't know, what do you think about that? That's how I see it. So play is about not knowing. You don't know what's going to happen next, and that's part of the development of it, because you stumble across something new, or you stumble across something that's new to you and pushes your boundaries. Whereas if you have to know, you have to know. Oh, I know it already. I know, and I think the pressure on a lot of academics is that that's the position they're in. They're in the position of being the person with the knowledge. They're in the position of being the expert,
Yeah.
and they have to know. And so I think even slipping for a minute not knowing might be a terrifying thing to a lot of people in that environment.
Yeah, I think that's very rich and worth wondering about. I think the supremacy of knowing in higher
Mm,
education is, to some extent, what lets folks enter into it. I mean, people get their jobs because their expertise is what the university needs, or a student can be admitted because, at least as far as the university is concerned, they have enough background or a preliminary knowledge to enroll
mm,
in that class, or even be accepted to the university based on their test scores or high school
mm,
GPA. I think what you're giving, and I completely co-sign with this, is how limiting it is to relate to people as knowers in not only higher ed, but in our world. And
yes.
I'd love to give that, while I definitely agree with you that the supremacy of knowing guides higher ed, I would love to think that bringing play with and in higher education is an opportunity to shift that focus of knowing to one of
Mm,
creating. And for me, it's
mm,
like a yes and, as we say in improv, to that yes and of like creating and discovering characters, creating and discovering ideas, relationships, possibilities, that if we focus so much on knowing, then there might be, in that sense that I felt when you mentioned it was a bleaker look at the theater, it would be
mm.
almost like there's the director saying, this is what we're going to do, this is what the syllabus is, this is what the course is about, this is what a major in psychology is. It feels like you're just being directed by someone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. And
And so
quite
this
tight constraints.
playfulness gives the open of saying, what if we all really don't know all that we need to know in order to do any of the things we're doing in higher ed,
Mm,
including take a class, do our research, hold a faculty meeting? Since we feel privileged to enter higher ed because of our knowing or our supremacy of that as a way to get out of it as well. We don't get out based on our smiles or
mm.
anything else. It's how much did we say we know to get in and out of it. I think the power of what you're giving and what could be a powerful challenge to higher education is an opportunity to shift the focus from knowing to creating.
I, I agree with that. And even just as you were saying that, I feel like, in like a lot of academics listening, if any academics are listening to this, they might think, "Oh, come on," because researching and writing, and researching and analysing and writing up and interpreting and all that you go through when you research as an academic, that is intrinsically creative. It's so creative. Look, you're creating or discovering one or the other knowledge. You could be creating it or you could be discovering it. But so it is incredibly creative. And then you write this, particularly with a PhD, you've done one, I've done one, you write this big book, you're writing this thing, and it's from nothing. So you're doing this from nothing. That is it. That is the very essence of creation. So it is creative, which is the dilemma here. I find the dilemma with them working at a university, because I just found it so, I don't know. It just pulled back on my playfulness. I found myself getting less and less playful, and I am playful. It's in my personality. It's in my identity. So it's a bit of a conundrum, I guess. I know, and then trying to do it as a lecturer or as a professor with students and trying to incorporate play. And I know, I don't know if I've talked with you about this before, but I remember when I was at the very beginning of my academic career and just doing tutorials and things.
Right.
And the unit coordinator and the program writer at the time, and my supervisor, actually, my wonderful supervisor of my PhD, she would try and incorporate playing to demonstrate various social psych theories. And there was one called the O Train, which is an established game that has been created many years ago, where you let students understand what it feels like to be ostracised and what ostracism does to people and their behaviour, etc. And it's a whole game. You set everything up like a train, and you put various people as the person that's going to be ostracised, like the target, and so you play this whole game. But which I thought was great, because it demonstrated very clearly what it feels like, and people would say, I really understand, because it was experiential. I felt it, which is what I take into my work. But I remember she ended up not doing that. She stopped doing that because some students just found it too overwhelming. Their sense of being ostracised freaked them out in that little game. So, and because universities, being what they are, they need to be mindful of their students and how they're feeling, etc. And so that was, I think she kind of scrapped it not long after that, of using that particular technique. So there's all those other things, I think, that come down within universities and with academia and higher education that put such boundaries on play. I don't know. I find it a conundrum, but I found it such a conundrum that I ended up leaving, because I wanted to be more playful and I wanted to get that back into my life. So that's what I did. So I left and started my own business instead. But bringing all this, I love social psychology because it's all about people and how we relate and how we influence each other and influence others. So getting out of that but still using social psych and taking it to the workplace, and hopefully further afield to communities as well, and incorporating play and putting play in there. So now I've got my play back.
Yeah, I love how you keep yes-anding, like your experiences in the theater that you maybe yes-anded and brought to your academic work, and how you're bringing both your theater and other arts-based experiences and your academic experiences now into the business world and as a business owner. How is that newer performance for you of Psychologies for Change, which is your company? What is it like for you to offer play, performance, and improvisation within in the community of business and business professionals? What's that like for you?
It's great, and I'm passionate about it. That whole notion of being passionate about something,
Nice.
and committed to it. So, and there's nothing more exciting than getting people onto, I guess, the play bandwagon, getting them to understand the benefits of it and how experiential, really feeling what it's like to do something and then seeing pennies drop, or seeing the penny drop, like the old aha moment. But it really happens when people actually experience something, and the way they can experience it is through play. So using improv games in the workplace, I find incredibly useful, because I've just got this little saying that I love, that when you play, you relax, and when you relax, you learn, and when you learn, you grow. So that's what, you develop, and that's what happens in the workplace. And certainly I use a lot of improv games to let people feel what it's like with a certain, and tie it to a certain social psych theory, and or certain skills that they're trying to learn and develop. And certainly use role playing and real playing, and using all those skills that actors have to act with and role play with people, because we're playing. And people understand that. So when they're in this safe environment, they understand that they're playing, and then they can try out new things, just like you do when you're in a rehearsal. Just as an actor does in rehearsal, they try out new things because it's safe. They have people observing, but not in an assessment capacity, just in a supportive capacity, to say, hey, yeah, I really saw you do that then. It was amazing what you just did then. And they kind of go, oh, really? Was I assertive? Yes, you were. And then you get it. We give them the feedback from an actor's point of view. Yeah, I felt you were assertive, and I felt that you really, put your boundaries here because you did this, this, and this. So the feedback component on the playing. So play becomes serious. It does become serious, but it's still the notion of pushing boundaries without the consequences or something in that moment. You can try things out in a safe space. You can try that red jacket on and put your beige one over there, or put your purple one over there. So taking that out into the workplace as a developmental tool really works. And I guess I started this business towards the end of the pandemic. But I had been with Corporate Actors Australia as a co-founder in Corporate Actors Australia, which was just because I formed that, or I didn't form that, but there's four of us that formed it together, and we're four actors, and we're all doing this. We're all doing work as business actors, and we're on the same jobs together a lot, because that's preferable to earning money. To earning money in jobs that you're not very good at, like waitressing or reception, all those sort of work, not very good at those. So being able to use your skills as an actor out in the corporate world or out in the business world became a really great way of earning money using the skills you have. And it was actually doing this sort of work that, years ago when I started doing this sort of work, just being hired as an actor to come along and enhance the training programs of organisational psychologists at the time that had programs that were using actors because they understood the power of experiential learning. That's what sparked my interest to go back to university and complete psychology degrees and my PhD in impression formation, essentially, because I watched these women, these two very inspirational women, organisational psychs, watched them and was just awe-inspired by how they could articulate exactly what was going on, going back to the communication thing, really, what was going on when people were within meetings and they were successful or they weren't, and they were very clear. They could articulate clearly what this person was doing. And I would concur with that and feeling that as the actor. So it's all about feeling when you were there as the actor. The psychs are all about picking it apart and deconstructing what the person was doing in their communication. So it's all about enhancing communication skills. And that's pretty much what the work I do is about, communication skills, because without communication, you've got nothing. If you can't communicate, you can't let people know how you're feeling. You can't influence anyone else. You can't get anything you want. I think it was Lisa Nichols, who's a speaker. She said once, communication is the distance between you and everything you want. And I
Hmm.
love that. Because I completely believe it and I understand what she means. If you can't communicate well, if your communication skills are lacking in some way or aren't as strong as they could be, then you're missing out on a whole lot of things relationally with your family, with your work, with your friends, with your social life. It all comes down to good communication. That's what I believe.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think you're
Mm.
pointing to something that, if you don't mind, I'd love to yes and is that
Mm.
you're giving the, and I appreciate so much your gift of the power of community and communication and relationality. And I think that that's another powerful, provocative offer you're making because as a developmentalist, or at least someone who learned the traditional work of developmental psychology, we often put language ability or communication skills as a merely cognitive and or physical activity. I know words, I know how to make sentences, I know how to use my mouth and tongue and points of articulation to make noise. And what folks sometimes forget is just how human the importance is of communication. In fact, in one of my courses, I teach on the cultural approaches to human development. I remind folks of the relationship between words like communication and community,
Mm. Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
importance of the fact that when we are communicating, we are building community, we are building relationships, which again transcends the mere knowing of higher ed. And I think that's why maybe one or both of us have had experiences where if higher ed's mostly dominated by that cognitive, that knowing that
Mm.
you've got to have it in order to do it and get in and get out and be successful, we've lost that richness, that totality of our humanity. And it seems like the work you're
Yeah.
doing in business is reigniting that vulnerability, relationality,
Yes.
humanity, and perhaps people
Yes.
learn new skills like how to hold a meeting better or how to, I don't know, give a speech, whatever those other business skills. But I saw you go, yes. So let me say yes and that. What's coming up for you with that based on what I just gave?
Well, just the way you describe that then is that's it sounds like that's what's going on. That's what I'm taking out to the workplace. It is it yes, and it will help people in their meetings and it will help people get get the outcomes that they want in this or that or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it's teaching well, it's helping people develop that sense, that the humanity, the empathy, the
Yeah,
understanding, the really listening. Because when you listen and then you connect, and the connection and all those skills that I don't know where they go. I don't know why they're not there. It it often amazes me that I am teaching some of the things or facilitating the knowledge on some of the things that I do, because I think, don't we, isn't that just a basic human thing? A basic human, empathy is a basic human emotion. We have empathy as human beings. And if we didn't, we wouldn't be able to function because society couldn't function. If we didn't care for our fellow human or other living creatures, we couldn't function. It would just collapse. But I find, I don't know, we become very guarded or something. We
right.
get guarded with our, we put our guard up and we cover our vulnerability, and because we're frightened of that being taken advantage of,
Right.
or people will maybe take advantage of that. And because that's the richness of what we are as human beings, some people will do that, some people won't. But it is essential to anything flourishing, is that we can be vulnerable, and we have empathy for other people, and we know how to listen to other people. That's one of the biggest things in communication. There are so many models and approaches to listening, which is,
Yeah.
I still, I find it amazing.
Yeah.
And I think also I've grown up being attuned to listening, because going right back to that story of when I was young, I was like the little baby of the family when
Mm,
all the party was happening. So I was just, all I could do really was watch it all go on. And then getting a bit older and having all that sort of family drama happen and not really understanding what was going on. But acutely sensing the pain that people were feeling and not
Mhm.
understanding why they weren't being honest here or telling the truth there, and thinking what and not understanding that. So I think that has really propelled me into psychology and to acting. And understanding that now, I think I've spent my life doing that, really trying to understand people's motivations and understand why they don't say what they mean, because we often don't, and because we're frightened or whatever the reasons are. But certainly developing good listening skills is so important, because it's not just listening to what people say, it's listening to what they do, it's listening to how they say it, which is such a big thing. All the nonverbal ways of communicating, we communicate so much, and people tend to ignore all that, or they register it, they register what someone is really saying, but then they choose to not act on that. They just act on the words that are spoken. So, which I find fascinating. So all of that is what I take to the workplace, because I think if you get those communication skills up and your understanding of what it is to listen and what it is to communicate meaning, and there's so many fabulous quotes with people and communication, and I think it could be George Bernard Shaw. I don't know. I should have checked all this out before I came on, but one of the quotes is, I don't know, all these people say these fabulous things.
We don't have to know in order to create it, right? Meaning and honoring what we said a
Okay,
little
we
while
don't have
ago.
to know.
We don't have to know it was George Bernard Shaw or Barack Obama or Godzilla. It could have been any or all of them.
All of them said.
All of them said it.
Just they said, the biggest problem with communication is the biggest problem with communication is the assumption that it's taken place. So we think we've said something, and so I've said that, so off I go because I've told you, but you could have heard something completely different.
Yeah.
You could, and how often does that happen? If people sat back and just tried to understand that, it happens all the time. So you think you've said this, but someone else that they've taken away and they've heard that, and it's completely different. And then
even
we
how we
wonder
play with
why.
language, but even how we play with language, Yvette, because I mean, I know there might be some variations in Australian English and say American English, but there's almost like there's this conduit metaphor in language mostly where folks give meaning or get meaning, we understand or it makes sense. These are maybe are phrases people often use when they're talking about building communication with each other, and I think a reframe of that or a new way of considering it is that conversations are co-created. Meaning is co-created.
Meaning is co-created.
It's not
Yes,
like
it
I'm
is.
giving it to you. Because I'm thinking about my improv life. There was this cool improv game we used to play, which I still play with folks, but it would be more of a non-verbal activity. But it was both not verbal and non-verbal. Maybe you've done it. Like folks, two improvisers in like a rehearsal, or it could be a game for a show. One would mime giving the other improviser a gift. And they might
Yes.
just
Yeah.
say, happy birthday, Yvette. And yeah,
What a beautiful book. Thank you, Luke.
I knew you loved the um, Great Tales of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And all of a sudden, I had no idea what you were going to name that gift as. You maybe didn't know that I was going to tell you what the title was or the author was, but we just created it right there once I said happy birthday and I gave you something. It wasn't like I laid out the whole scene. We could be creating our relationship in that dialogue, the gift, our feelings about it,
Yeah.
all of it, and it points to the emergent co-creation of the activity rather than merely giving or taking meaning from each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe that's not I love how you just explained that then. Maybe that's not well enough understood out in the world, because people think I've said something and so you've understood something.
Right, I got it, what you said. Like, did you get it? Like, that's what people will say. I don't know if that happens in Australian English, but a
I
very
think it
common thing, a
does. Yeah.
professor or someone, did you get it? Did it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I
Does that
wonder if
make sense? Does that make
exactly.
sense? Does
And
that
there's
make
almost
sense?
like another performance for me, which is like, how can we create this activity? How can we create our communication together without
Mm.
defaulting to meaning is located in what one of us said or what one of us got from it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that rarely, well, not really, but often that it's not the same thing. It's not the
Yeah.
same thing. And then our whole connection is based on assumption
Exactly.
and not really what we've sort of created together, or not really what has gone on.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and it's complex, and I don't know why it's so complex to communicate, but gee, it is. Well, no, maybe I do. We're all separate. We're all these little individual creatures walking around in our own little separate bodies, but desperate for connection. Doesn't matter how introverted you are,
Yeah.
or how a lone wolf you think you are. We're all desperate. We all need to be connected. It's just what we have to have. Human beings
Beautiful.
are social creatures. So, and the way we connect is through language.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And so, and it's difficult. It can be difficult. Meaning, understanding and listening and being on the same page can be
Yeah.
really difficult.
Yeah. In fact, it may not even be necessary. It's about creating a new
It may
page
not be
together
necessary.
rather than
Yes.
being on the same page. It's creating the path while we walk it, or it's creating the book using the page image, or creating the book as we write it.
Yes. Which is great. And that's how communities are formed, or that's
Yes.
how cultures are formed. Surely
Yeah.
that's how cultures are formed, communities are formed. A tight business unit is formed because you've all done that together. And if someone leaves, someone comes in, then how do we shift slightly because that
Yeah.
new person's come in? How do you shift? How do we all kind of shift a bit because that new person's come in and co-create that new environment together?
Beautiful. And I think that's why I
Mm,
lovingly challenge the supremacy of knowing in higher ed, not because
mm,
I don't give respect to the gifts of what people's lives have been in their worlds and what they bring to the classroom or the
mm.
faculty meeting or my life and what I bring to that activity. I think I just want to remind everyone that we can create together, and that the in focus that I tend to have when I'm having a class or being a part of a meeting is how can we build this group? How can we support each other to keep creating this environment, keep creating our relationships, not just
Mm.
give individual knowing or give individual expertise, but create something together with all that we've got, our
Yes.
backgrounds, our histories, our passions, our confusions, our
Yeah.
annoyances, and do something together with that without being overly determined by what we're doing or how it's going
Yes.
to go or what it's going to result in.
And I think that with taking that to the business world as
Yeah.
well, and the workplace, like out of academia and taking it to the workplace, different workplace in business, is because there's all the KPIs and there's things that people have to meet, and
Right.
so there is that pressure there, and I guess organizations try and get processes and systems in place to help people follow that line to get that bottom line, because that's what it's about, and workplaces are about the bottom line, and that's okay. That's what they're there for. They're business. They're making, they're kind of making money, and that's what they need to do. They need to produce, but to make sure that it's still to keep the humanity within that workplace. So everyone
Mm,
wants to do this. So which is a win-win for everybody. It makes the people working there be human and enjoy being there, and it makes them probably work their best because they want to be there and they're enjoying being there and they're connected. They feel that sense of purpose is there and it's real. And so the business benefits from that as well. So those things go hand in hand. So it's
mhm.
certainly not just let's just play to make everyone feel good, even though that's what happens anyway.
Yeah, it's great too, but it doesn't have
Yeah.
to have that. It can have both a richer and unknowable possibility. They can result in unknowable possibilities and richer than even we think when we're thinking of just having an instrumental focus. Like it
Mm.
reminds me of what we might have done when we did our international class at the Eastside Institute, when we learned about Holtzman's distinction between tool and result and tool for
Yes.
result. And
Yes.
often the world, higher ed and business, at least from my vantage point, have a tool for result preference. I won't say merely they only do that, but they often think, well, here's our method, our tool, and we do that or use that to get a particular result, a tool
Mm.
for a particular result. When we think about something as a tool and result, we're honoring that both what we create and what tools we are creating to make those possibilities are creating each other as we go along. They are creating together, and they're simultaneously coming into being. And
Yeah.
that feels like a great improv scene or a great conversation rather than a scripted, overly determined, a priori, outcome driven. I understand that bottom lines are important. I understand
Yeah.
outcomes for
Yeah.
learning are things that people care about. I do think that we've overprivileged that at the
I think
expense
so.
of tool and resulting our lives more.
I think this is kind of getting much larger now, but it's just a thought that came in. I love Korean literature, and
Hmm.
a lot of the books that I'm reading or have read are about people just wanting to get off that bandwagon of working really hard. They work Koreans. This is a generalization, I know, but they work hard. They're hardworking people, and it's tough to get. It's you've got to work hard to get the right qualifications to get out there and get that job, and you get that job in that big organization, and then you work really, really hard, and it's hard work. And a lot of the younger people, I think there's a movement, and I think it's also happening in China as well as Japan. But so it's a Northeast Asian thing going on, perhaps. But they opt out. They opt out of that life, and yes, it means they're not going to have as much money, but they opt out for a gentler, more community-based life. So they opt out. They want to. There's so many books I've read about people starting bookshops. They just want to have a bookshop, and
Nice.
it doesn't bring much money in, but what it does bring in is the people that come in and sit there and have their cup of coffee and read books off the shelf, and they have talks with authors, and people come. So this sense of community that these people gravitate to with these little cafes or these little bookshops, this quieter, smaller life. But it's the community that is important, and the relationships and their sense of connection, which is the most important thing. And I think it's in China, I think there's a whole, like a lot of the younger generation, they call it lying flat,
Okay.
which is a really interesting image. So a lot of the young people are lying flat, which means they're moving away from the big cities. They're getting little modest abodes out in the wilderness, not in the wilderness, but out of cities where there's lots of work, and they're just I don't know, selling little things that they might make, or
Beautiful.
their lives are smaller and calmer, and that sense of community is more important, which I find that fascinating as a movement. But that's getting very meta, and it's probably getting away from what we're talking about.
No,
It's getting
it's exactly what we're creating. For me, just to build as a yes and to that, I mean, I apologize if this feels like, this white American lens on the image of lying flat, but a gift I make of, much like when I gave you that improv gift that became the book, when I hear that phrase lying flat, as opposed to maybe how others might have seen their lives before, it makes me think of that way in which we stand in the race. We're moving from meeting to meeting. We're moving from
yes,
activity to activity. We're trying to get ahead, move ahead. And this lying flat almost gives a sense of calm. This doesn't mean inactivity. It maybe just means a bit of looking back and being a bit more, let me lie down and just see what I can take in and do. Let me not feel the race, but maybe be more grounded and centered. That does not mean that is the answer to what it means to lie flat, but I definitely got a calmer image than often we
absolutely.
do in business and academia, which is publish or perish, or win the race, or get
Yes.
ahead, or other kinds of, again, competitive individual focuses. So I think that gave me a sense of hope that people are saying, I can create new kinds of worlds. I think, just to be wondering with you, Yvette, I wonder if the folks that are using this lying flat practice to start that bookshop or create that new kind of community activity would call what they're doing play.
I wonder.
Being curious. For me, it has a family resemblance to creating a new kind of character for ourselves, or trying on a new
Yeah.
kind of clothing like you mentioned, like earlier about the costume for a character. For me, it has a family resemblance, even if it's not in the theater. It doesn't involve a script or, a series of dialogues that a character has to
Mm.
say. For me, that's a kind of lifespan play, is to say, I want to create a new kind of life with and in the world, and it comes in this form. Starting this bookshop, creating art, having a conversation without being overly determined by being right or convincing someone. But I'm wondering how you feel about that, since you've been giving such powerful, expansive views of what play could look like. Does play come up for you in that kind of way for folks? How, in your own life,
I
for example?
Well, with that whole notion of really changing, opting out of a particular lifestyle that seems to be the norm,
Yeah.
and opting out of that and having it's very, I find that very I find it courageous.
Mm.
And
Well,
is it a sense of play? I guess play doesn't always have to be kind of jolly or silly. It doesn't always have to be jolly and silly.
Okay.
It can be jolly and silly, and that's when it's really good fun because you just laugh until you cry because it's so much fun. But it's not always like that. It can really push boundaries, and that's where its developmental
Mm.
capacity comes in.
Yeah.
So I'm just imagining for people that are really choosing a different life to what the norm is. I think might be a little bit risky and it's courageous and they don't know how it's going to work out, but it is pushing boundaries. It might be playing with what is possible,
Yeah.
certainly. And I
Yeah.
think that is part of play. Or I think the definition of play can be expanded to that, to playing with possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
you don't have to stay in that one path. Think about it, and you can play with doing that and you can see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so powerful because even as a person who, was schooled in, childhood theories of play or why children play, I think again that has like a lifespan resemblance to what we're creating here, because children are like, I want to play with the possibilities of who I am. I don't stop being this young child, and I can also become the mommy in this play scene or this
Mm,
superhero, and it doesn't make me feel limited in my identity. I can create new
mm,
possibilities for me. And so I'm feeling so hopeful and inspired by the folks you're mentioning, maybe in countries like in China or South Korea, saying, I think the performance that I thought I was going to do of being in business or having a certain kind of career or adult life, I'm going to play with the possibility of trying something else and lie
yes,
flat and
yes,
create this world and build
yes,
community in this capacity. And so
yeah,
for me, without saying it's an exact performance, it's more of a family relationship. It's like another possibility of how we can all celebrate the possibilities of play, and not just if we're actors or kids or doing
mm.
art-based work.
No, it's for everybody.
Yeah,
It's for everybody in every situation, and to expand.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, just like
yeah.
for me as an improviser, I know that there's a bazillion ways this scene or game could go, and this is how we're creating it now. We could do it another way, another time with other people, and it could go completely other ways. And I want to be, as you said earlier, in this moment and present as I create the world as I'm living in it and being and becoming in it. And I think
Mm,
that's so powerful because, again, maybe my initial that you've helped me see a new way on. Initially, if we see ourselves as mere scripted actors cast in a role, then we don't see ourselves as creating new performances. I think the gift of
that's
what we're
right.
creating around play, whether it comes in acting, improvising, or other forms of creative life activity, is that we are builders of environments rather than merely in them, and that
Mm,
you're inviting people to see that as people in business. And we both have had experiences inviting folks to do that in higher education, in the theater,
Mm,
in other contexts. I think that's such a rich and needed offer for our world, especially since
mm.
we think the world is kind of just this is how it is, or this is how I am.
Yep.
Play can invite us to play with those possibilities and create something new together and not be overly stuck on knowing what we're doing or how it's going or what we're supposed to be doing. Because that can be, like you said earlier, stressful and burdensome.
Absolutely. And I think when I started doing improv, the very first few times I did improv, so you get given, you're given the framework or whatever the game is or the activity is. So you've got that framework, and you think, right. And maybe I was a control freak a lot when I was younger. I don't know, but I would think, right, this is okay. I've got that story all in my head. But of course, you can't do that because if it's I don't know, if it's telling a story one at a time, one word at a time, or
Right.
it's just telling a story around a group. You have this idea of it's the story Sally goes to the park.
Yeah.
Okay, so and something happens as Sally goes to the park, and so you're going to think about that. But then all of a sudden, it turns out to be something completely different. And within the confines or within the rules of improv, you need to yes and you're yes
Yeah.
anding what the person in front of you has said. And
Absolutely.
so let that notion of, it was scary for me initially to let go of that sense of, no,
Mm,
I know where it needs to go, I know where this needs to go, but then it couldn't. So that was a scary thing for me. I remember my very first goes of doing improv classes and things. I would find that scary. But it's interesting looking back on it now
it's so
how I found
powerful.
that scary, instead of listening to that person thinking,
Yeah.
oh, okay, then she did this, and then diving in onto that idea. Yeah,
Yeah, that's so
so you
rich.
do need to let go of the need to get to a particular place in that only in that way. There's different
Yeah.
ways of doing things. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if I can yes and that, thinking that it's up to you to either figure it out or do it alone. In other words, one of the things that I admit for me too, improv at times initially when I started doing it felt stressful. And I
Mm,
think as I learned, I had to let go of the fact, well, it's not up to you to do this, it's up to us. I don't mean that in like a
that's right.
burdensome responsibility sense. I mean, you mentioned it just even what you said. Oh, my scene partner just said is a gift that I can play with. So I'm not making up the story alone. I don't even have to. I've got scene partners broadly defined to build it with.
That's right.
And
And
therefore, it becomes what we can create and we can do together rather than,
yeah.
come on, Yvette, come up with something, be witty, be
Yes.
funny, be
Yes.
insightful. It's be you and be, as you said, listen to what's being given, respond and build and co create with that. And I think, again, for me, with my more specific focus or life in the higher ed, we often speak to be heard rather than speak to create and listen
Yes.
to create. We
Yeah.
often listen to just wait. We listen to wait our turn, and then we speak to be heard.
That's right.
And I'd like to
And
invite us to
yeah.
keep giving the scene of saying, what do we want to create together? And how can we
Mm,
pay attention to slash celebrate the gifts of what everyone's giving, whether it's in this meeting, in this classroom, in this conversation right now, etc.
mm. I suppose I'm just thinking of the structure of higher ed. So, you've got lectures where you speak to be heard because you're imparting knowledge in a lecture. And then you've got tutes, so you've got tutorials. So, and that is an opportunity to create, I suppose. Certainly tutorials are an opportunity, if they're not too big, to create whatever you want around the topic that you've listened to a lecture to. You come to the tutorial to sort of delve a bit deeper. So instead of the tutor sitting there speaking to be heard, it's all about, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
What is the viewpoints of everybody? And I guess that that does happen a lot in tutorials anyway. So that maybe that's certainly tutorials is a place where academia can really expand its playfulness.
Sure. And
I
I
don't
think
know,
you're right.
maybe
Yeah,
not.
no, I think so
I
too.
don't know.
I think there's just I don't want to say like it's just in a like here's the one and only answer slash solution because I don't even want to
No.
deal with the problem solution paradigm. I think
Yeah.
that inviting more opportunities or co-creating more opportunities for folks to yes and what's being made available is a powerful everyday way to live our lives, even if we're not on an improv stage or doing an improv show, for example. So even if it's a large lecture or a particularly overly determined business meeting, inviting folks to yes and co-create with and in those forms or scenes as they usually are, I think is a step in a possible new way of building those environments rather than, again, just to get meaning or be lectured to or be spoken to, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in many ways, sorry if this sounds overly psychological, I think also in many ways your opening narrative of your youth and your childhood, perhaps there's an offer saying, I want to somehow create within this world and not just merely be in it and see what people are doing.
Yes,
Witness.
just observing.
Right.
Yeah,
There's
the
something I
silent
think.
observer.
Right. I think observing is great and watching is. So I'm not dismissing it. I think it's not the fullest story because people still want to, as young as even children, want to be creators of their worlds.
Yes, I think so, and want to contribute to that.
Exactly.
And have their say or be able to be heard.
And be building with it. And even though I know that we have different cultural values around what contributions people can make based on age or gender or level of education, which I understand are varied and cultural, I think that at least as an improviser, I want us to wonder about building ensembles with all kinds of levels of expertise or age or life experiences. I think that enriches us in ways that we've often not given ourselves time and space for because of the identity burden of, well, you're too young for this conversation or you're not experienced enough. I understand the importance of being thoughtful around this might be a sensitive topic or this might not be a conversation that we want to have with young children. At the same time, I think we often play the exclusionary practice rather than the inclusionary practice. But I want to check in with you as a social psychologist, because I know that comes up a lot in the field about how we include or exclude different marginalized and or dominant groups.
Absolutely. And that's something that with just going back to that, talking before about creating, we're all creating our environment. And if we can try and think about that in the business world. So when you do have people that are different, the whole notion, gender diversity is a big thing with some clients that I work with as well, and how to create that environment that is inclusive to people of different gender. How do you create that environment? How do you do it? And if something's been functioning well for a long time and it's successful, and why do you need to change it? But society is changing, or and that's the general thing. I guess I'm talking about. I guess I'm talking about Western society when I say that, but really it's probably everywhere anyway. But that's my frame of reference for this particular image I've got in my head at the moment. And everything's been chugging along nicely. Why change it? Because society is changing and we need to make space for people that are different. And well, come on in. We're not excluding you, but by certain actions, by certain ways of talking, by certain activities, it is exclusionary. It does exclude particular people.
Powerful.
And in this case, particular different genders. So it's a matter of shifting. It's a matter of it's a culture shift. It's
Mm-hmm.
a culture shift, and of course, all big businesses, particularly big organisations, they have their own cultures.
Very
They've
powerful.
created these cultures, and and I guess different universities have their own cultures as well. And different businesses have their own cultures because they're created by the people in them.
Bingo.
And they've been created, and that's what they've grown up, and that's grown up, and this is how it is, and we're all kind of in there together. But then when you start wanting something different to come in, those people are excluded because they're not really, that wasn't their co-creation. So,
Exactly.
sorry, I had that turned off. You wouldn't have
Yeah,
thought so,
so
would you?
exactly. Well, I think that's actually, I mean, if I heard the song, it was "We Are Family." So I think it's
Yes.
a powerful. Sorry. So I'm gonna improvise like that was the gift you just gave to the scene to say that that song came in as a powerful offer to suggest that if we're going to create culture, which we are rather than just be in them, then we need to see ourselves as the unit, as the group, the family, the
Yeah.
business, the community, and we've got to do that together. So thank you, Sister Sledge, for reminding us of that.
Improv there, just jumping on that one.
It was absolutely part of the scene. It was not an
It
oops.
was.
It was not a oops. I shut that off because in many ways, my dear, it would be like you're saying the only noise that should be here is Yvette and Luke. Sister Sledge, be quiet. Instead, we're saying, of course, come on in. In fact, I would say that when we let go of the burdens of identity and we say everyone is a scene, like there's maybe more human terms than like scene partner or human being without discrediting the power people have as being parts of particular groups. I'm not dismissing that. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
perhaps that has gotten in the way of saying who's in or out of these kinds of activities, whether
Yes,
it's about gender
absolutely.
or race or sexual orientation or age or level of education. The joy I always have about improv is that everyone can do it and we can all do it together. I don't say, sorry, I
Absolutely.
only play with people that have at least 5 years of improv experience and can get at least 6 laughs a show.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
already
yeah,
feeling a
yeah.
bit too like we have when we set things up about minimum education qualifications or minimum business experience. I think there's power in that diversity without being overly attached to identity.
Yeah, yeah. And certainly just that just going back to the excluding people on the basis of what their identity or their gender, whatever it is. I don't think it's an intentional thing to, and particularly in big organisations when they've got that culture set up and it's working, it's not an intentional thing. People aren't being bullies or being, well, by the main part, they're not. They just don't see it.
Powerful.
They just don't see it, and so they might need to play with that, with their identities, and they might need to play with the culture that they've created unwittingly, maybe, who knows,
Yeah.
or that they've just sort of slipped into because it works for them or whatever. But they need to play with their behaviours and their activities, and to
Mm,
understand the impact, the
yeah.
social impact that has on people that are different. And
Beautiful.
it's about getting into someone else's point of view, or it's about empathy as well. It's about
Mhm.
developing that empathy and
Mhm.
understanding the world from someone else's viewpoint.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm,
Powerful. Yes, for me, so many gifts again, and one that's immediately coming to me is the power of play as culture making activity. I'm not
mm,
dismissing that cultures, a business culture, an academic culture, a family culture aren't already in place. And I think
mm,
the dynamic nature of that, including when we bring in a new baby to the family or a new employee to the company or we teach
mm,
another round of this course, means that we're doing another kind of culture creating activity and not just living only within the culture as it is. For me, culture is dynamic, both the broader senses of what we mean by it or even those more
absolutely.
local everyday practices, not just American culture or Australian culture or
Yeah.
Microsoft culture. The idea of
Mm,
culture as an activity we create, and perhaps creating culture is a playful activity, not merely just a instrumental thing that a business does, or
mm.
when higher ed talks about its mission and vision and outcomes for students. I think that gets overly determined and deterministic, and the playfulness gets lost and the possibilities get limited.
Exactly. Absolutely. The possibilities get limited.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to remember. Like, what is play good for? What is it good for? And that's what it's good for, because it expands possibilities.
Yeah.
For everything. For
Beautiful.
personally, for relationships, for organizationally, for communities. It expands the possibilities. And it's not all silly and jovial. It can be very, very serious.
Absolutely. It can be very, in the developmental sense, uneasy or uncomfortable,
Uneasy.
right? And not
Nicely
because we're
said.
trying
Yeah.
to make people feel shame or embarrassment, but just the power of development means doing things we don't know how to do and what we're doing.
Mm. Mm.
And we're open to doing that together, and not necessarily getting it right or figuring it out, but knowing that we can lean on each other as we try out these new possibilities and
Mm.
create what we want to create together. That can be very humbling. And I think that's often what I love to bring to folks when I do improv in higher ed, is to say, this is not to make someone stand out and be embarrassed, or to see who's the funniest, or in some ways rank you in ways that education often has. It's a
Mm.
tool for me. Improv can be a tool to support us, to lean on and get support from each other,
Absolutely.
and
It is.
remind us of our creating together, and to do that with the love and support of yes and, of our humanity, of everything we've got, rather than who's the funniest, who read the chapter last night and can give us the best answer. That becomes the more competitive individual focus. And although you're right, people do one-person shows, or there are individual contributions from an improviser, it's always within in the group that those exist.
And I think, just when you were talking then about the whole notion of what you can do, and not, it's not there to make you feel bad, but it can, because it can be challenging, because you don't know, and you're stumbling, and no one likes to stumble. Everyone likes to be able to be seen to be doing something well. But with the Global Play Brigade,
Yeah.
now,
Nice.
I don't know how many people would know about the Global Play Brigade that might be listening or watching this.
Maybe, and in the spirit of not being sure and not knowing, let's let everyone know, because we maybe have our life experiences that could enrich others around the Global Play Brigade, even if they've heard of it or participated in some way. So yeah, let's tell folks a little bit about our connections with and performances with the Global Play Brigade, and connect that to what we're talking about and building together.
Okay, so certainly, well, Global Play Brigade. So it actually started off. Started off in and around the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, and at the very beginning of, I think it was 2020, or maybe about March. But anyway, I received an email from Kathy Saylett, and Kathy kind of sent an email out to, I don't know how many people, maybe 50 or something like that, or a bit more, and just saying, hey, do you just want to chat about, just want to all get together and create something? And I thought, oh, that sounds good. Nothing else is going on. Lockdown, just sitting at home. Let's try that. So I just remember the beginning of the Global Play Brigade. This was before it was a Global Play Brigade. It wasn't anything, actually. It was just a whole lot of people came together for an initial kind of meeting together, and Zoom was around. And then it turned into, I found myself doing late night Zooms with strangers from around the world. It was great. So because I'm here in 17 hours ahead of the rest of the world, it was often, in the middle of the night for me. I was speaking to people that were in Greece, that were in Israel, that were in America, that were in all different parts of Europe. But just all these people were just joining in, and no one knew each other, but we were just tasked with creating something with play.
Mm.
And we thought, well, what do we want to create? No one knew what they're creating. Anyway, it went on like this for quite a few weeks until we started sort of figuring out, a little bit of a structure, and we'd meet together as big groups and then go off and meet and have little late night Zooms. And then look, it organically just grew into this thing. And then we all co-created the name Global Play Brigade,
Right.
stuck with that. And then it just developed into this amazing community of people from around the world that come together to play. And initially it was so it was clowns and academics and therapists and psychologists and performers and actors. That was kind of the main thrust of the people that were getting together, wanting to create something to help people in the pandemic who were really isolated during lockdown. I think it was Cheng Zheng, actually, from China, who really wanted to help because the lockdowns are quite severe there.
Right.
Well, I mean, they were severe in a lot of other places as well. But at that point, he really wanted to figure out a way to help people in lockdown because everyone was so freaking out. It was such a horrible time. It's almost like we've moved so far past it now, we've almost forgotten what it was like, or I have. Anyway, so Global Play Brigade, people would facilitate workshops, offer them for free online to people, whoever wanted to join, and we'd just play and playing. And I found myself creating things that had such solid purpose at the time. It was all around playing for mental health or playing for communication, upping your communication skills. What are you really saying? And playing for all those things. So it had a really solid purpose. The workshops that I would co-create with others and we would deliver them. But I also found that I did so many embarrassing things when I was working, well, not working with, but just when I was hosting things. And, Zoom was kind of new, not knowing the technology and playing with that. And I did so many embarrassing things and I was mortified until I realized that no one else was embarrassed or no one else saw it as an issue. Like they had fun with it. They laughed with it. There was one time I was hosting a whole global session and I was putting music on and I, had all the music ready to go, plugged it in and started singing and dancing. And I was dancing and I was singing out really loud because often we dance out at the end of meetings and everyone dances because they can hear the music. But I hadn't shared the music, so I was the only one that could hear it. So I was dancing and I was singing and I was doing all this really loudly and I kind of stopped at one moment and just saw people laughing their heads off. They were laughing. Share your music, and I was mortified, but no one cared. No one cared. It was fun, and then I thought, oh my gosh, and shared the music, and off it went. But so there were just little moments, and since I know how to share music now, I so know how to share music on Zoom. Don't worry about that. But there was, and so many other things that with facilitating workshops and mistakes I made, but it didn't matter because This is all about play. This is the Global Play Brigade.
Yeah.
And why we want it to have a good solid purpose, it's still playing and we're all allowed to learn. So it's been the most expansive thing for me to be involved with the Global Play Brigade. And I know for a lot of other people as well.
Oh, yeah. For sure. I mean, all that you gave was such a nice memory. I have very similar, maybe slightly later in the game, joining you all and creating. And I just want to say that of all the gifts you just gave in that review of the Global Play Brigade's initial experiences or earliest experiences, I loved this story of you not sharing the sound of your music and that people didn't, castigate you or make fun of you or laugh at you. They actually just wanted to share the joy you were creating, and they wanted to join in. So their invitation was not, hey, Yvette, you're wasting our time because you're not sharing your music, or we're bored watching you have fun. They were like, we want to be in with you. And it was like a joy to come to do that together. And it created the community of being able to just figure it all out and do something together rather than know it, get it right, be perfect, be the leader, be accurate, all those other kinds of burdens. And who knows, just to share without in celebrating the mistake, maybe future meetings could have been like, okay, now the meetings always end with someone starting to dance and sing without the music playing, and then everybody else joins in after. Or someone else plays music while someone else dances, or whatever's going
Yeah.
on. It just, again, for me, is a powerful reminder of culture creating. Maybe the new
Yeah.
culture of a GPB meeting is the facilitator of the meeting has a silent dance party, and the rest just watch and clap for them. That doesn't mean it has to be. It just reminds
A
us of the
silent
joy.
dance
Right?
party.
Okay, this meeting is being led by Yvette, so in the last 5 minutes, we know we're going to watch this solo silent dance party, and we will cheer and clap for that. Hooray! Because again, it opens up the reminder of the scripts that we often feel of how a meeting's supposed to go, or what we do on
That's
Zoom,
right.
or how sound is shared, or what we can dance without music. I don't know about you, but I sing without
Yeah.
music. Why can't I dance without music?
That's
Right?
right.
I don't say I'm sorry. I can't sing a cappella. I have to have the accompanying sound. I sing whatever I want. I don't even have to know the words. I can sing it in gibberish. I enjoy world music, and I know very little of what they're saying. All those possibilities and more. And I think that's, for me, the power of the Global Play Brigade, is overall, whether it's these free events, the way that we organize each other, it was, let's create pathways for new possibilities for our humanity, new possibilities for social change and community, and new ways to celebrate our lives together, even in the toughest times like the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be able to create something like that. And it was the very essence of creativity. There was nothing, and then there was something, just from people getting together. That was the essence of creativity, working with that. It was so amazing. And then there is still this entity that exists there, and that is still and developing all the time, developing and organically growing into something else. And it's gone through many changes.
Yeah, because I just to share, I mean, this is my memory. We used to have more virtual meetings like 1 or 2 times a month, or a different number of online offerings, and maybe those have changed in frequency, in availability, but they're reminding us of the continuous culture creating. There's definitely been a change to support more the Global Play Brigade. Meaning I've really witnessed the power of building the Global Play Brigade, not only as an international group, but even supporting different areas of the world to build the movement, like, for example, Global Play Brigade Latin America or in Asia. So I'm wondering if that's showing up for you, or what ways you're still building with the Global Play Brigade in 2024, almost 2025.
2025. Well, something that I really, really wanted, because I have been involved since the very beginning, and really, I haven't got all the stats off the top of my head because I don't know, but I've got a roundabout. We've reached about something like 15,000 people in over 100 or more than 100 workshops, different workshops that people attend. And now we're trying to have very focused workshops throughout the year. So the one at the very beginning of the year was, it was looking at developing mental health and playing with mental health. The one in the middle, like later in the year, was looking at play with education. Play intelligence. And then one that just recently that we've just done is helping, which I found really solid in its purpose, was reaching out to not-for-profits or grassroots organisations and offering them workshops to help them with their business skills, to help them, how to make teams function really well, or how to improve communication skills, how to inspire people with storytelling, all those skills that get given to the business sector and corporate sector all the time for lots of money. But we wanted to offer it to these organizations that don't have any money. They're on the smell of an oil rag, but trying to do something really worthwhile. So that was the latest offering that Global Play Brigade offered to the world, and it was really well attended and it was really well received. So that's kind of what's been going on this year, and we're becoming a bit more focused in our offerings, so people kind of know what to come along for, and then they can join in the play and understanding why they're there. I suppose it's helpful to a lot of people. But something personally for me, being down here at the bottom of the world in Australia, I really want to get it pumping down here. I want to be an instigator or grassroots of Global Play Brigade in Australia. It's been difficult because I don't know why. Maybe I've just been very busy for the last couple of years on creating my own business, using play and getting it out there for the business sector. But I would really like to develop Global Play Brigade and be a regional leader for Global Play Brigade in Australia.
Lovely.
And that's my mission for next year. That is my mission for 2025. So for Global Play Brigade anyway, and certainly my businesses, of course, I still want that going along because it's all advocating for play. But certainly if there's a way of even doing face-to-face in Australia and developing Global Play Brigade here, because I know various other regions have done face-to-face in their region as well. However, that being said, we're definitely, it's the Global Play Brigade, and part of the joy for me is playing with people from all over the world, from all these different cultures. That is such a joy, and I feel so privileged and lucky to be working with people from all over the world and meeting up with them and getting to know them. Yeah, it's such a fabulous thing. So certainly keeping the global, but expanding it down here in the land of Oz. That's a mission of mine for next year. So watch this space, or maybe not this space, or maybe this space, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would love to invite folks that are listening and or watching us to, reach out to you about any and everything that you're doing. In other words, joining the Global Play Brigade, maybe building, whether they're in Australia or not, ways to build more international play connections.
Yes.
And to support what I sense has just been one of the most powerful offers of our conversation, which is supporting everyone to celebrate the human right and possibilities of play. So I think in addition to taking in and celebrating, I think I'd like to invite folks checking out our conversation to yes and it by reaching out to Yvette and finding out more about the Global Play Brigade or about Psychologies for Change, or commenting about something that we've been talking about and giving us all something else or new to consider about play and identity and business and higher ed. I think there's an invitation here to keep building, and so we'll also add websites or other information about Yvette's work, the Global Play Brigade, other conversation points that have come up here, and we hope that everyone will continue to yes and it and keep building this international movement to celebrate play, improv, performance, and the arts.
Yes. That's wonderful, Luke. And I would love to hear from people, and if people want to join in the conversation and talk about play and what it's good for. What is play good for?
Yeah.
And one of the mantras of Global Play Brigade is we want to make play mainstream.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, great.
And in many ways, I think our conversation is an invitation to do that, meaning we've not seen it as just two people who have a theater and or improv background who love playing. I think we've been building it in a way that supports its possibilities more mainstream, and I'd love to invite everyone to support and build that movement. I think it's important for our global health and well-being and development of each other and our world. So, yeah, I'm really grateful for our conversation. As we might be getting ready to edit the scene, is there anything else we want to say to each other and or our listeners / viewers before we invite folks to yes and reach out to us?
Oh, look, I don't know. I feel like we've had a very rich conversation. We've gone all over the place. We've gone individual. We've gone worldwide. We've gone in and out. We've covered a whole lot of businesses and things. But I'm just really grateful to be speaking with someone like you, Luke, who you just get it. You just get it. You get it. Isn't that what you get it? You got it. But it's so lovely just to be able to talk and riff around all of this, which is what we've been doing today. And it's been really nice to do that. And I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely.
And I hope people will join us to do it again.
In fact,
Yeah.
yeah. In fact, I will end it by saying I have been so loving our conversation today and in history. I've been really enjoying getting closer to you both today and
Yeah.
before. And I would love to invite folks to get closer to us by reaching out to us, and
Yes.
for us to see what you and I want to keep doing together. Maybe there's a way we can build more a future dialogue for a next part of this conversation, a Global Play Brigade event, a possibility of business and or higher ed activities. I think this is an invitation for all of us to keep creating and keep connecting.
Love it. Absolutely. I do too. Thank you.
No, thank you. And thanks, everybody. Again, this is my dear friend and co-creator of today's conversation, Yvette Alcott. Check out all the information about Yvette's business, Global Play Brigade, any other important and exciting things we mentioned in our conversation in the notes or links to this conversation, and looking forward to what and how we will keep creating in the future.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Thanks, Yvette.
Thank
Bye.
you, Luke. Bye.